Tonight, the boundaries between the world of the living and the realm of the dead dissolve like pigment in sacred oils. Feel the cool breath of limestone caverns where shadows hold more truth than sunlight ever could, where each brushstroke carries the weight of eternity itself. If this journey touches your soul, join us again and whisper from where you listen to us. Now, dim the lights, breathe deeply. Let us dream with memories that are not our own. I descend the narrow steps carved into living rock, my torch casting dancing shadows that seem to bring the painted figures to life before they even exist. The air grows cooler with each step downward, carrying with it the scent of earth and time, of secrets buried so deep that even the gods must strain to hear their whispers. This is my domain, not the bright world above where merchants haggle and politicians scheme, but this sacred darkness where art serves purposes that transcend the merely decorative. The limestone walls press close around me as I make my way deeper into the hillside, following passages that my grandfather carved with his own hands, guided by visions that came to him in dreams sent by the ancestors. Each chamber we create is more than mere tomb. It is a gateway between worlds, a bridge spanning the chasm that separates the living from the dead, a place where painted figures can guide souls through the mysteries that await beyond the final breath. My workshop lies at the heart of this underground labyrinth, a chamber hollowed from the earth's bones, where I have spent the better part of my life transforming blank stone into windows onto eternity. The space exists in perpetual twilight, lit only by oil lamps that burn with flames fed by sacred oils, their light revealing colors that seem to glow with their own inner fire, pigments that capture not just the appearance of life, but its essential spirit. The tools of my trade wait in their appointed places, brushes made from the finest sable, their tips worn to perfect points through years of delicate work, palettes carved from marble that once graced the temples of our ancestors, grinding stones that have reduced countless minerals to powder fine enough to capture the subtlest gradations of flesh and fabric. Each implement is more than mere tool. It is extension of will, conduit through which vision flows from imagination into permanent reality. The pigments themselves rest in ceramic vessels arranged according to principles that govern not just artistic harmony but cosmic order. The reds derived from cinnabar speak of blood and life force, of the vital energy that animates all living things. The blues ground from lapis lazuli carry within them the essence of sky and sea, of the infinite spaces through which souls must travel on their journey to the afterlife. The yellows extracted from orpiment glow like captured sunlight, promising warmth and illumination in the cold darkness of the tomb. This underground atelier has been my sanctuary for 30 years, the place where I learned the sacred art of painting for the dead, where I discovered that true artistry lies not in pleasing the living, but in serving those who have passed beyond the veil of mortality. Here, surrounded by the patient silence of stone, I have created images that will outlive empires, that will speak to viewers centuries hence in the same voice they speak to me now. The underground atelier reveals itself in the lamplight like a secret chamber from the dreams of gods, its walls carved with niches that hold the tools and materials of my sacred craft. This is no ordinary workshop, but a temple dedicated to the art of painting for eternity, where every surface serves a purpose in the great work of transforming blank stone into windows onto the afterlife. The chamber exists outside the normal flow of time, suspended between the world of the living above and the realm of the dead that stretches endlessly below. The ceiling arches overhead in perfect curves that my grandfather calculated according to principles learned from the ancient builders, mathematical relationships that ensure the space resonates with harmonies that please both earthly eyes and divine sensibilities. Every dimension has been chosen with care, every angle measured to create optimal conditions for the delicate work of painting figures that must appear alive even in death, vibrant even in the eternal stillness of the tomb. Along the eastern wall, carved shelves hold my collection of pigments in vessels that range from simple clay pots to elaborate containers made from precious metals. Each pigment has its own story, its own journey from distant mines and exotic shores to this underground sanctuary where it will be transformed into the substance of eternal art. The cinnabar glows like liquid fire, even in its powdered form, while the ultramarine seems to hold fragments of sky captured and ground to powder fine as silk. The grinding station occupies the chamber's center, a marble slab worn smooth by decades of use, its surface bearing the subtle depressions left by countless sessions of reducing raw minerals to the fine powders that painting demands. The muller rests beside it, its weight familiar in my hands, its surface polished to mirror brightness through years of patient work. This is where transformation begins, where rough stone becomes smooth powder, where raw material yields its essential color, where the earth's treasures are prepared for their ultimate purpose. My brushes stand in ranks like soldiers awaiting orders, each one crafted for specific purposes, each one bearing the accumulated wisdom of countless paintings. The finest are made from sable hair gathered from animals that lived in the distant forests of the north, their tips so delicate they can paint individual eyelashes, so precise they can capture the subtle play of emotion across a painted face. Others, broader and more robust, serve for laying in the great washes of color that establish the fundamental harmonies of each composition. The palette table bears the stains of 1,000 color mixtures, its marble surface a palimpsest of artistic endeavor that records the history of every painting created in this chamber. Here I blend the hues that will bring painted figures to life, that will suggest the warmth of living flesh, the richness of fine fabrics, the golden glow of jewelry that speaks of wealth and status. Each mixture must be perfect, for there are no second chances when painting for eternity. Oil lamps positioned at strategic points around the chamber provide illumination that mimics the conditions under which the finished paintings will be viewed. The flames burn with steady light that reveals colors in their true intensity, that shows the subtle gradations of tone and hue that separate masterful work from mere competence.
This lighting has been calculated through generations of experience, adjusted and refined until it achieves perfect balance between revelation and mystery. The walls themselves serve as gallery and library, covered with sketches and studies that record the accumulated knowledge of my craft. Here are the canonical poses for figures in banquet scenes, the proper gestures for dancers celebrating the journey to the afterlife, the correct proportions for depicting the gods and goddesses who will guide the deceased through the trials that await beyond death. Every detail has been codified, every element assigned its proper meaning in the visual language that speaks directly to the soul. Storage niches carved into the living rock hold the precious materials that elevate tomb painting from mere craft to sacred art. Sheets of gold leaf wait to add divine radiance to the halos of gods, while silver provides the cool light of moon and stars. Precious stones ground to powder create colors that exist nowhere in nature, hues so intense they seem to generate their own illumination, so pure they appear to be fragments of paradise itself made visible. The chamber's acoustics have been designed with the same care as its visual elements, creating a space where the slightest sound resonates with perfect clarity, while harsh noises are absorbed and softened. The gentle scrape of brush against stone, the soft whisper of pigment being mixed with binding medium, the almost inaudible sigh of oil lamps burning. These sounds create a symphony of creation that accompanies the daily miracle of bringing painted figures to life. A small altar occupies one corner of the chamber, dedicated to the spirits of departed masters who continue to guide my work from beyond the veil of death. Here I leave offerings of wine and honey, burning incense that carries my prayers to those who taught me the sacred mysteries of tomb painting. Their presence fills the chamber like invisible light, their wisdom flowing through my hands as I work, their approval or disapproval evident in the way colors flow or resist, in the ease or difficulty with which each painting takes shape. The floor beneath my feet is paved with stones that have been worn smooth by the passage of countless feet, polished by the accumulated weight of generations who have practiced this ancient art in this sacred space. Each step I take connects me to all who came before, each movement part of a dance that has been performed in this chamber for centuries. Each gesture a link in the unbroken chain of knowledge that stretches from the first tomb painter to the last.
Water seeps slowly through the limestone walls, creating the perfect humidity for working with pigments that must remain workable for hours at a time. This natural moisture, filtered through layers of stone and earth, carries with it minerals that enhance the binding properties of our paints, that help create the chemical bonds that will preserve our work for millennia. Even the earth itself conspires to aid in the creation of art that will outlive empires. The chamber breathes with the slow rhythm of geological time, expanding and contracting with temperature changes so subtle they can barely be measured, yet significant enough to affect the delicate work of painting on stone. I have learned to read these moods, to understand when conditions are perfect for the finest work,
and when it is better to prepare materials, to plan compositions, to study the ancient texts that record the symbolic meanings of every element that appears in tomb paintings. This underground atelier is more than workspace. It is sanctuary, temple, the sacred heart of an art that serves purposes beyond the merely aesthetic. Here, in chambers carved from the earth's bones, I practice the most ancient of all artistic callings, creating images that will guide souls through the greatest mystery of all, paintings that will speak across centuries in the eternal language of color and form. The preparation of pigments in this underground realm follows rituals as ancient as the hills themselves, each color requiring its own sacred process, its own communion with the elemental forces that give it life and power. I begin with the cinnabar, that blood-red mineral that carries within its crystalline heart the very essence of life force, the vital energy that flows through all living things and must be captured if painted figures are to appear truly alive rather than merely decorative. The cinnabar arrives from the distant mines of Hispania in rough chunks that glow like coals in the lamplight, their surfaces bearing the marks of the earth's violent birth, the pressure and heat that transformed base mercury into this precious source of the most sacred red. I handle each piece with reverence, understanding that I hold in my hands material that has journeyed through geological ages to reach this moment, this purpose, this transformation from raw mineral into the substance of eternal art. The grinding begins with movements that have been refined through generations of practice, the pestle moving in circles that follow patterns older than written language, rhythms that echo the cosmic dances that govern the movement of stars and planets. The cinnabar resists at first, its crystalline structure reluctant to yield its secrets. But patience and persistence gradually break down its defenses, releasing the brilliant red powder that will become the blood in painted veins, the flush of life in marble cheeks. As I work, the chamber fills with the sharp scent of mercury, that quicksilver essence that the ancients believed connected the earthly and divine realms, that served as messenger between gods and mortals. The smell carries with it memories of the deep places where this mineral was born, of caverns that have never known sunlight, of pressures that could crush mountains and temperatures that could melt stone. Each grain of powder holds this history, this accumulated power of the earth's hidden forces. Young Vel watches from his position beside the oil lamps, his eyes wide with the wonder that marks all true apprentices when they first witness the transformation of base matter into artistic material. At 15, he possesses the steady hands and keen eye that tomb painting demands, but more importantly, he shows the reverence for ancient knowledge that separates those who will become masters from those who will remain forever apprentices. See how the color deepens as the grinding progresses, I tell him, holding up a sample of the powder to catch the lamplight. This is not mere red, but the essence of life itself, the color that will make painted figures appear to breathe, to pulse with the vital force that animates all creation. Without proper cinnabar, our work becomes mere decoration rather than sacred art. The lesson extends beyond technique to the deeper philosophy that governs our craft. We work not with ordinary materials, but with substances that carry symbolic meaning, that speak in the ancient language of color and form to souls preparing for the greatest journey of all. Each pigment must be perfect, each mixture precisely balanced, for the painted figures we create will serve as guides and companions through the mysteries that await beyond death. I turn next to the malachite, that green mineral that whispers of forests and growing things, of the eternal cycle of death and rebirth that governs all natural processes. The stone arrives from the copper mines of Cyprus, its surface bearing the characteristic bands of green that speak of slow formation through countless seasons, of mineral-rich waters depositing layer upon layer of crystalline beauty in the earth's hidden chambers. Young Vel watches from his position beside the oil lamps, his eyes wide with the wonder that marks all true apprentices when they first witness the transformation of base matter into artistic material. At 15, he possesses the steady hands and keen eye that tomb painting demands, but more importantly, he shows the reverence for ancient knowledge that separates.
The malachite requires different treatment than the cinnabar, gentler handling, that preserves the subtle variations in hue that make it so valuable for depicting the natural world. I work with smaller amounts, grinding each portion separately to maintain the distinct shades that range from the pale green of new leaves to the deep emerald of ancient forests. These variations will allow me to paint landscapes that seem to breathe with life, vegetation that appears to grow even in the eternal stillness of the tomb. The grinding stone sings a different song as it works the malachite, a softer whisper that speaks of growing things, of rain falling on fertile earth, of the patient processes that transform seed into mighty tree. This is the color of hope, of renewal, of the promise that death is not ending, but transformation, not darkness, but passage into new forms of existence. Vel brings fresh oil for the lamps, his movements careful and deliberate as he tends the flames that provide our only illumination in this underground realm. He has learned that even the quality of light affects the preparation of pigments, that colors mixed in poor illumination will appear different when viewed under the steady flames that will light the finished tomb. The oil itself is sacred, pressed from olives that grew in groves dedicated to the gods, blessed by priests who understand the connection between light and divine presence. The ultramarine waits in its silk wrapping like a sleeping prince, the most precious of all our pigments, ground from lapis lazuli that has traveled the length of the known world to reach our workshop. This blue carries within it the essence of sky and sea, of the infinite spaces through which souls must travel on their journey to the afterlife. The stone itself seems to glow with inner light, as if it has captured fragments of heaven and holds them prisoner in crystalline form. The preparation of ultramarine follows the most ancient and secret processes, techniques passed down through bloodlines, never written, never shared with outsiders. The stone must be heated gently, not enough to damage its structure, but sufficient to make it more receptive to grinding. The temperature must be precise, the timing exact, for ultramarine is temperamental, capable of losing its celestial quality if handled carelessly. I begin the grinding with movements that border on the ritualistic, understanding that I am working with material that costs more than gold, that represents months of a craftsman's wages, that carries within it the accumulated prayers of all who have handled it on its long journey from distant mountains to this underground chamber. The blue powder that emerges seems to glow with its own light, so pure it appears to be made of crystallized sky itself. The chamber fills with the accumulated perfume of transformation, the sharp tang of cinnabar, the earthy scent of malachite, the almost ethereal fragrance of ultramarine. These are the incenses of our particular devotion, the aromatics that accompany the daily miracle of turning earth's treasures into the substance of eternal art. In their mingled fragrances lies the promise of paintings that will outlive empires, that will speak to viewers centuries hence in the timeless language of color and form.
Young Vel approaches the prepared wall with hands that tremble not from fear, but from the weight of responsibility that comes with learning to paint for eternity. At 15, he possesses the steady eye and delicate touch that tomb painting demands, but more importantly, he shows the reverence for ancient knowledge that separates those destined for mastery from those who will forever remain mere decorators. In the flickering lamplight, his shadow dances across the limestone surface like a ghost learning to inhabit the world of the living. I guide his hand as he makes his first tentative marks on the prepared plaster, feeling through his movements the same uncertainty I once experienced when my own master introduced me to the sacred mysteries of painting for the dead. The brush feels foreign in his grip, too light and too heavy simultaneously, an instrument that seems to possess its own will, its own preferences about how it should be held and moved across the stone surface. "Remember," I whisper, my voice barely audible in the chamber's profound silence, "you are not merely applying pigment to stone, but giving life to figures that will guide souls through the greatest mystery of all. Each brushstroke carries intention. Each color choice speaks in the ancient language that the dead understand better than the living. Paint not what you see, but what you know, not the temporary, but the eternal." The lesson begins with the simplest of exercises, the painting of a single eye, that window to the soul that must appear alive even in death, alert even in eternal rest. Vel's first attempts are clumsy, the proportions wrong, the colors muddy, the expression vacant rather than vital. But I remember my own early failures, the countless eyes that stared blindly from practice walls, the gradual accumulation of skill that comes only through patient repetition and careful observation. The eye is the most important element in any tomb painting, I explain as I demonstrate the proper technique, my brush moving with the confidence born of 30 years' practice. It must appear to see, not just the physical world, but the spiritual realm that lies beyond mortal perception. The iris must hold depth, the pupil must suggest awareness, the surrounding flesh must pulse with the warmth of life, even though it depicts one who has passed beyond the veil of death. Vel watches with the intensity of a scholar studying sacred texts, his young mind struggling to absorb not just the technical aspects of the work, but the deeper philosophy that governs every decision, every gesture, every choice of color and composition. He is learning that tomb painting is not mere craft, but sacred calling, not decoration, but communication with forces that exist beyond human understanding. The chamber fills with the soft sounds of instruction, the gentle scrape of brush against stone, the whispered corrections and encouragements, the almost inaudible sigh of oil lamps burning steadily in their niches. These are the sounds that have echoed through this space for generations, the acoustic signature of knowledge being passed from master to apprentice in the ancient tradition that ensures the survival of our sacred art.
The chamber fills with the soft sounds of instruction, the gentle scrape of brush against stone, the whispered corrections and encouragements, the almost inaudible sigh of oil lamps burning steadily in their niches. These are the sounds that have echoed through this space for generations, the acoustic signature of knowledge being passed from master to apprentice in the ancient tradition that ensures the survival of our sacred art. As the hours pass, Vel's confidence grows, his movements becoming more assured, his understanding deepening with each successful brushstroke. The eye he paints begins to show signs of life, the iris gaining depth and complexity, the surrounding flesh taking on the subtle variations of tone that suggest blood flowing beneath translucent skin. This is the moment when apprentice begins to become artist, when technical skill starts to merge with spiritual understanding. Now the mouth, I instruct, guiding him to the next challenge. This must suggest not speech, but the eternal silence that comes with perfect wisdom. Not hunger, but satisfaction with the feast that awaits in the afterlife. The lips must appear soft yet permanent, capable of blessing, yet beyond the need for words. The painting of lips requires different techniques than the eye. Softer brushstrokes that build up color gradually, layer upon layer of subtle hues that create the illusion of flesh that breathes, even though it depicts one who has moved beyond the need for breath. Vel struggles with the delicate gradations, his young hands not yet trained to the precise control that such work demands. I place my hand over his, guiding the brush through the movements that will create the proper effect. Feeling his muscles learn the rhythm, his fingers absorb the pressure, his wrist discover the angle that allows pigment to flow smoothly across the stone surface. This is how knowledge passes from generation to generation, not through words alone, but through the direct transmission of skill from experienced hands to eager ones. Feel how the brush wants to move, I tell him. Do not force it, but guide it. Do not dominate it, but collaborate with it. The brush knows its purpose. The pigment understands its destiny. Your role is not to impose your will, but to facilitate the transformation that wants to occur, to serve as conduit between vision and reality. The afternoon progresses with its rhythm of instruction and practice, correction and encouragement, failure and gradual improvement. Vel's painted figure begins to take shape on the practice wall, crude still, but showing promise, lacking refinement, but possessing the essential spark that separates true art from mere technical exercise. In his work, I see echoes of my own early efforts, the same struggles and small victories that mark every apprentice's journey toward mastery. Other apprentices have worked in this chamber before Vel, their practice pieces still visible on walls that serve as gallery and library of learning. Here are the first attempts of masters who now create paintings that grace the tombs of princes, the early works of artists whose names are spoken with reverence throughout Etruria. Each crude figure, each imperfect face serves as reminder that mastery comes not through inspiration alone, but through patient accumulation of skill, through countless hours of practice in chambers lit only by oil lamps and the inner fire of dedication. The lamplight flickers across Vel's face as he works,
revealing the concentration that marks all true apprentices, the absolute focus that comes when mind and hand unite in service to something greater than themselves. He is learning not just to paint, but to see, not just to apply pigment, but to understand the symbolic language that speaks directly to the soul, not just to create decoration, but to serve the eternal purposes that tomb painting has served since the first artist descended into darkness to paint for the dead. In his trembling hands lies the future of our ancient craft, the hope that knowledge accumulated over centuries will continue to flow from master to apprentice, that the sacred art of painting for eternity will survive the changes that threaten all traditional ways, that somewhere in the darkness of future tombs, painted figures will continue to guide souls through the mysteries that await beyond the final breath.
The mathematics of death reveal themselves in proportions that must be calculated with the precision of temple architects. For the painted walls of a tomb are not mere decoration, but sacred geometry made visible, cosmic harmonies that guide souls through the labyrinth of afterlife. I approach each new commission with compass and measuring rod, tools as essential to my craft as brushes and pigments, instruments that ensure every figure, every architectural element, every decorative border aligns with the divine ratios that govern both earthly beauty and celestial order. The tomb of Velsatis spreads before me like a three-dimensional manuscript waiting to be illuminated, its walls demanding compositions that will transform this underground chamber into a palace worthy of eternal habitation. Each surface must be calculated according to principles learned from the ancient builders, mathematical relationships that ensure the painted scenes achieve perfect balance between earthly representation and divine symbolism, between the familiar world the deceased has left behind and the mysterious realm he is about to enter. I begin with the eastern wall, the surface that will receive the rising sun's first rays when the tomb is opened for ritual observances. This wall demands the most important scene, the banquet that will welcome Velsatis into the company of the blessed dead, the eternal feast where painted guests will recline forever in poses that must appear both natural and ceremonial, both relaxed and dignified, both human and somehow more than human. The proportions follow the sacred ratios that my master taught me, measurements that trace their lineage back to the temple builders of ancient times, to architects who understood that certain mathematical relationships please not just the eye, but the soul itself. The height of each figure must relate to the width of the wall according to formulas that ensure harmony, that create visual music in stone and pigment, that speak in the universal language of proportion that transcends cultural boundaries. Vel watches as I mark the wall with charcoal, dividing the surface into sections that will contain specific elements of the composition. The central area will hold the figure of Velsatis himself, reclining on his banquet couch with the dignity befitting a man of his wealth and status. To his left, his wife Ramtha will occupy a position of equal honor, her painted form serving as eternal companion in the feast that knows no ending. Around them, servants and musicians will create the atmosphere of celebration that marks the soul's successful transition from earthly life to divine existence. See how each measurement relates to the others, I explain,
my voice echoing softly in the chamber's profound silence. The height of the main figures equals exactly 1/3 the width of the wall, while the secondary figures maintain proportions that create visual harmony without competing for attention. These are not arbitrary choices, but sacred mathematics, ratios that ensure the painted scene achieves the perfect balance that pleases both gods and mortals.
The geometric framework extends beyond mere proportion to encompass the symbolic meanings that every element must carry. The banquet couch must be positioned at precisely the correct angle to suggest both comfort and authority, while the table before it must display foods and vessels that speak of abundance without appearing ostentatious, of wealth without vulgarity, of earthly pleasure transformed into spiritual nourishment. I move to the northern wall, the surface that will remain in perpetual shadow, the space reserved for scenes that deal with the darker mysteries of death and transformation. Here, the mathematics become more complex, the proportions more subtle, for these paintings must suggest rather than declare, must hint at truths too profound for direct representation, must guide the soul through territories that no living person has explored. The composition I plan for this wall will show the journey of the soul through the underworld, the passage through trials and challenges that test the deceased's worthiness for eternal bliss. Each figure in this procession must be positioned according to principles that create movement without chaos, progression without confusion, narrative flow that carries the eye from scene to scene while maintaining overall unity of design. Vel brings fresh charcoal as I continue marking the walls, his young hands steady as he assists in the precise measurements that will determine the success or failure of the entire commission. He is learning that tomb painting is as much science as art, that mathematical precision underlies every apparently spontaneous brushstroke, that the most natural-looking poses are often the result of careful calculation rather than intuitive gesture. The western wall presents its own challenges, for this surface will receive the setting sun's last light, the golden illumination that speaks of endings and transitions, of the daily death that mirrors the greater mystery of mortal passing. The scenes planned for this wall must capture the melancholy beauty of departure, while promising the joy of reunion, must acknowledge loss while celebrating transformation, must speak to the living who will visit this tomb while serving the dead who will inhabit it eternally. The southern wall, bathed in the steady light of midday when the tomb is opened, will display scenes of earthly life that celebrate Velsati's accomplishments while placing them in the context of eternal values. Here I will paint the activities that defined his mortal existence, his success in trade, his patronage of artists and musicians, his devotion to family and community, but transformed through sacred geometry into something that transcends mere biography and becomes universal statement about the proper relationship between temporal achievement and spiritual worth.
Each wall demands its own mathematical approach, its own system of proportions that takes into account not just aesthetic considerations, but the symbolic requirements of tomb painting, the need to create compositions that function as both art and religious instruction, both decoration and spiritual guidance. The measurements I make today
will determine whether the finished paintings achieve the perfect harmony that allows them to serve their ultimate purpose, the guidance of souls through the greatest mystery of all. The compass traces perfect circles that will contain the heads of painted figures, ensuring that each face achieves the ideal proportions that suggest both individual personality and universal humanity. The measuring rod divides walls into sections that follow the golden ratio, that mathematical relationship found throughout nature, that speaks to something deep in human consciousness, that creates visual satisfaction at levels below conscious awareness. As the day progresses, the tomb begins to reveal its hidden geometry, the mathematical skeleton that will support the flesh of painted figures, the invisible framework that will ensure every element achieves perfect relationship with every other element. This is the foundation upon which all successful tomb painting rests, not inspiration alone, but inspiration guided by knowledge, not spontaneous creation, but careful planning that appears spontaneous, not arbitrary decoration, but sacred mathematics made visible in pigment and stone. The banker Arndt Welche sits before me in the upper world, his aging flesh marked by the accumulated weight of 70 years, his eyes clouded with the approaching shadow of death, yet his voice carries the authority of one who has commanded respect throughout a lifetime of successful commerce. He speaks of how he wishes to be remembered, not as the frail old man he has become, but as the vigorous merchant prince he once was, surrounded by the symbols of wealth and power that death cannot diminish, portrayed in the eternal prime that the afterlife promises to restore. "Paint me as I was at 30, he commands, his voice still carrying echoes of the strength that once negotiated contracts worth fortunes, that once commanded fleets of trading vessels, that once spoke as equal with princes and senators. Show me reclining at the eternal banquet with the dignity befitting my station, surrounded by the treasures I have accumulated, the family I have raised, the legacy I leave behind. Let those who visit my tomb see not what death has made of me, but what life allowed me to become." I study his face with the eye of one who must see beyond present reality to capture essential truth, who must paint not what is, but what was, and what will be again in the realm beyond death. Beneath the wrinkled skin and thinning hair, I perceive the strong features that once commanded attention in the marketplace, the keen intelligence that built a commercial empire from modest beginnings, the fundamental character that no amount of aging can truly diminish. The commission presents challenges that go beyond mere technical skill, for I must create a portrait that satisfies both artistic truth and client expectation, that captures individual personality while conforming to the canonical requirements of tomb painting, that pleases the living patron while serving the eternal needs of his soul. This is the delicate balance that every tomb painter must achieve, the marriage of realistic representation with idealized vision, of personal likeness with universal symbolism. I begin with preliminary sketches on wax tablets, working out the composition that will show Arndt in his eternal glory, reclining on a banquet couch of appropriate magnificence, his painted form radiating the health and vigor that death will restore to him. The pose must suggest both relaxation and authority, both comfort and dignity, both earthly success and spiritual worthiness. Every detail must be calculated to create the proper impression, to tell the story of a life well lived and a death well prepared. The clothing I designed for his painted form speaks of wealth without ostentation, of status without vulgarity. The toga will be painted in the finest ultramarine, that celestial blue that costs more than gold, its folds arranged to suggest both the dignity of Roman citizenship and the prosperity that made such citizenship meaningful. The purple stripe that marks his equestrian rank will glow with genuine murex dye, that royal color extracted from shells gathered in distant seas, processed according to secrets known only to the most skilled dyers.
Vel watches as I work out the details of jewelry and accessories that will accompany Arnth into eternity. Each piece chosen not just for its beauty, but for its symbolic meaning, its ability to communicate status and achievement to viewers who understand the visual language of wealth and power. The gold rings that will adorn his painted fingers speak of commercial success, while the elaborate fibula that will fasten his cloak tells of connections to the highest levels of society. Remember, I tell my young apprentice, we paint not just a man, but a statement about the proper relationship between earthly achievement and eternal reward. Arndt's wealth was not mere accumulation, but stewardship, not greed, but responsibility. The treasures that surround him in the painted scene represent not what he hoarded, but what he used wisely, not what he grasped, but what he shared with family and community. The background of the scene requires careful consideration, for it must suggest the eternal banquet hall where Arnth will feast forever, the celestial palace that awaits those who have lived with honor and died with dignity. I plan architectural elements that speak of permanence and grandeur, columns of painted marble that will never crumble, walls decorated with frescoes that will never fade, ceilings that arch toward infinity itself. The other figures in the composition must be chosen with equal care, for they will serve as Arndt's eternal companions, the souls with whom he will share the endless feast of the blessed dead. His wife Tanaquil will recline beside him, her painted form restored to the beauty of her youth, her expression radiating the love that death cannot diminish. Their children, taken by plague in their prime, will appear as they would have been in their maturity, the promise of their truncated lives fulfilled in the realm beyond mortality. The servants who attend the eternal banquet must be painted with the same care as the principal figures, for in death all souls achieve dignity, all spirits deserve respect. The slave who pours wine becomes cupbearer to the gods. The musician who provides entertainment joins the celestial chorus. The dancer who celebrates the feast participates in the cosmic dance that governs the movement of stars and planets.
The food and drink that grace the painted table speak of abundance that knows no scarcity, of nourishment that satisfies not just physical hunger, but spiritual longing. The fruits will appear eternally fresh, the wine perpetually sweet, the bread forever warm from ovens that burn with divine fire. These are not mere symbols, but promises, visual guarantees of the feast that awaits those who have earned their place at the table of the blessed. As I refine the composition, adjusting proportions and relationships, I feel the weight of responsibility that comes with creating art that will outlive empires.
that will speak to viewers centuries hence about the values and beliefs that defined our civilization. The painted Aranth must embody not just individual achievement, but cultural ideals, not just personal success, but collective aspiration, not just temporal accomplishment, but eternal hope. The preliminary sketches complete, I prepare to transfer the composition to the tomb wall, to begin the delicate process of transforming charcoal lines into painted reality, of giving life to figures that will guide Aran's soul through the mysteries that await beyond death. In my hands lies the power to grant a form of immortality, to ensure that his memory survives not just in the minds of those who knew him, but in the permanent record of stone and pigment that will endure long after all who remember his living face have themselves passed into the realm of shadows. The eternal banquet unfolds across the tomb wall like a vision of paradise made visible, each painted figure frozen in the perfect moment of celebration that will last forever. Each gesture capturing the joy of souls who have successfully completed the great journey from mortality to divine existence. The scene I create must suggest not just a single meal, but the endless feast that awaits the blessed dead, where painted guests recline in perpetual comfort at tables laden with foods that never spoil, wine that never sours, pleasures that never fade. I begin with the central couch, where Vel Satis will recline in eternal glory, his painted form radiating the health and vigor that death has restored to him. The banquet furniture must appear both luxurious and comfortable, crafted from woods that never decay, upholstered with fabrics that never wear, decorated with metals that never tarnish. Every detail speaks of permanence, of abundance that knows no scarcity, of comfort that requires no maintenance. The table before him groans under the weight of eternal plenty, fruits that appear perpetually ripe, their painted surfaces glistening with dew that never evaporates, their colors so intense they seem to glow with inner light. Grapes cluster in perfect abundance, each individual sphere painted with such care that it appears ready to burst with sweetness. Pomegranates split open to reveal seeds like rubies, their crimson depths promising the fertility and renewal that characterize the afterlife. Vel watches as I paint the wine vessels that will serve the eternal feast, each cup and amphora designed according to principles that ensure both beauty and symbolic meaning. The crater that holds the mixed wine bears decorations that tell stories of divine favor, of gods who smile upon the deceased, of celestial approval for a life well lived. The cups from which painted guests will drink forever are shaped like flowers, their forms suggesting the natural beauty that death cannot diminish. See how each element serves multiple purposes, I explain as I work, my brush moving with the confidence born of decades of practice. The food nourishes not just the body, but the soul. The wine intoxicates not with mere alcohol, but with divine inspiration. The vessels contain not just liquid, but the essence of celebration itself. Nothing in this scene exists merely for decoration. Every detail carries meaning. Every object speaks in the ancient language that the dead understand better than the living. The painted guests who share this eternal feast must be chosen with care, for they represent not just companions, but the entire community of blessed souls who have earned their place at the divine table. I paint Vel's ancestors, their forms restored to the prime of life, their faces radiating the wisdom that comes only through successful completion of the great journey. His parents appear as they were in their youth, their love for each other undimmed by death, their pride in their son's achievements evident in their painted expressions.
The servants who attend this celestial banquet move with grace that speaks of willing service rather than compelled labor. For in the afterlife, all souls achieve dignity. All spirits find their proper place in the cosmic order. The cup-bearer who pours wine does so with the reverence of one serving sacred communion, while the musicians who provide entertainment participate in harmonies that echo the music of the spheres themselves. I paint the dancers with special care, for their movements must suggest not just celebration, but the cosmic dance that governs all existence, the eternal rhythm that connects earthly joy with divine ecstasy. Their poses capture moments of perfect balance, gestures that speak of liberation from the constraints of mortality, expressions that radiate the pure happiness that comes only to those who have transcended the limitations of physical existence. The architectural setting for this eternal feast requires equal attention, for the painted hall must appear worthy of its divine purpose, while remaining recognizably connected to the earthly world the deceased has left behind. I design columns that soar toward infinity, their capitals decorated with motifs that speak of natural abundance, leaves that never wither, flowers that never fade, vines that bear fruit in perpetual harvest. The ceiling above the banquet scene arches like the vault of heaven itself, painted with stars that shine with steady light, constellations that tell stories of divine favor and eternal protection. The painted sky suggests not the changeable weather of earthly existence, but the perfect climate of paradise, where every day brings ideal conditions for the feast that never ends. As the composition develops, I add details that speak to the specific interests and achievements of Velsatis, elements that personalize the universal theme of eternal celebration. The painted table displays vessels that reflect his success in trade, exotic foods that speak of his commercial connections to distant lands, decorative elements that acknowledge his patronage of artists and craftsmen. Yet these personal touches are integrated seamlessly into the larger symbolic framework, individual achievement subsumed into universal truth. The lighting in the painted scene must appear to come from sources that never dim, illumination that speaks of divine radiance rather than mere earthly fire. I paint oil lamps that burn with flames fed by sacred oils, their light steady and warm, their glow suggesting the presence of benevolent spirits who watch over the eternal feast. The painted shadows are soft and gentle, creating depth without darkness, modeling without harshness. The colors I choose for this scene must speak of joy without frivolity, celebration without excess, abundance without waste. The reds glow like wine and roses. The blues shine like sky and sea. The golds gleam like sunlight and honey. Each hue is carefully calculated to create harmony with its neighbors, to contribute to the overall effect
of perfect balance that characterizes the realm of the blessed dead. The painted fabrics that drape the banquet couches and clothe the eternal guests must appear both luxurious and comfortable, rich enough to suggest divine favor, yet practical enough for eternal use. I paint silks that shimmer with their own light, wools that appear softer than clouds, linens that seem to breathe with life of their own. The patterns and decorations speak of wealth and status while maintaining the dignity appropriate to sacred art. As the eternal banquet takes shape on the tomb wall, it becomes more than mere painting. It transforms into promise, into guarantee, into visual proof that death is not ending, but transformation, not loss but gain, not darkness but passage into light beyond imagining. The painted guests will feast forever in perfect happiness, their joy undiminished by time, their celebration eternal as the stars themselves.
In the tomb of the triclinium, the dancers move in rhythms that seem to echo the very music of creation itself. Their painted forms captured in moments of perfect grace that speak of liberation from the constraints of mortality, of souls freed to participate in the cosmic dance that governs all existence. These figures represent more than mere entertainment. They are visual manifestations of the harmony that awaits the blessed dead, the eternal celebration that marks successful transition from earthly life to divine existence. I approach this most sacred of all tomb painting subjects with reverence that borders on fear, for the dancing figures must capture something that exists beyond human understanding, must suggest movements that follow rhythms older than time itself, must convey the joy of souls who have discovered their true nature in the realm beyond death. Each gesture must appear both spontaneous and eternal, both individual and universal, both human and somehow transcendent. The central dancer dominates the composition, her painted form radiating energy that seems to pulse with its own inner light, her movements suggesting the primal dance that brought the universe into being, that continues to govern the movement of stars and planets, that connects all living things in patterns too vast for mortal comprehension. Her pose captures the moment of perfect balance between earth and sky, between mortal memory and divine aspiration, between the world she has left behind and the realm she has entered. The drapery that flows around her painted form must appear to move with the wind of eternity itself, fabric that responds not to earthly breezes but to the breath of gods, to the cosmic forces that animate all existence. I paint each fold with care that borders on obsession, understanding that the way cloth falls and flows can suggest the presence of invisible forces, can hint at the spiritual energies that surround and support the dancing soul. Vel watches with fascination as I work on the dancer's face, struggling to capture an expression that speaks of joy beyond human experience, of knowledge that comes only through successful completion of the great journey from life to death to rebirth. The eyes must appear to see not just the physical world, but the spiritual realm that lies beyond mortal perception, while the mouth suggests laughter that echoes through eternity itself. The dancers are the most difficult of all tomb painting subjects, I explain as I refine the delicate features, my brush moving with movements so subtle they barely disturb the pigment. They must appear to move while remaining forever still, must suggest music we cannot hear,
must capture rhythms that exist only in the realm of the blessed dead. Each figure represents not just celebration, but transformation, not just joy, but transcendence. The musicians who accompany the eternal dance require equal attention, for their painted instruments must appear to produce melodies that speak directly to the soul, harmonies that bypass the ears and resonate in the deepest chambers of the heart. I paint lyres whose strings seem to vibrate with celestial music, flutes that appear to channel the breath of gods, drums that beat with the rhythm of cosmic time itself.
The male dancers who partner the central figure move with masculine grace that speaks of strength transformed into beauty, of power channeled into art, of earthly vigor elevated to divine purpose. Their poses capture moments of athletic perfection that will last forever, gestures that speak of bodies freed from the limitations of mortality, of souls that have discovered their true capacity for movement and expression. The background against which these eternal dancers perform must suggest the celestial ballroom where such celebrations take place, the divine space where souls gather to participate in festivities that know no ending. I paint architectural elements that soar beyond the merely functional into the realm of pure beauty. Columns that seem to grow like living trees, arches that frame infinity itself, spaces that expand beyond the physical boundaries of the tomb wall. The lighting in this painted scene must appear to come from sources that transcend ordinary illumination, radiance that speaks of divine presence rather than mere earthly fire. I suggest the glow of stars made visible, the luminescence of souls themselves, the accumulated light of all who have achieved perfect harmony with cosmic order. The painted shadows are soft and warm, creating depth without darkness, mystery without fear. The colors I choose for the dancing scene must speak of joy without frivolity, celebration without excess, movement without chaos. The flowing garments shimmer with hues that seem to change as the eye moves across them, suggesting the play of light on fabric that moves with supernatural grace. The flesh tones glow with health that death has restored, with vitality that knows no diminishment, with beauty that time cannot touch. As I work on the intricate details of jewelry and ornaments that adorn the dancing figures, I remember the ancient teachings about the symbolic meaning of each element. The golden wreaths that crown the dancers speak of victory over death, of triumph in the great contest between mortality and eternity. The bracelets and anklets that encircle their limbs suggest the bonds of love that connect all souls in the realm of the blessed, ties that strengthen rather than constrain, relationships that enhance rather than limit. The painted floor beneath the dancer's feet must appear to support movements that defy earthly physics, to provide foundation for steps that follow rhythms unknown to mortal choreography. I paint patterns that suggest the mathematical harmonies that govern cosmic order, geometric designs that speak of the underlying structure that supports all existence, decorative elements that hint at the perfect balance that characterizes the blessed dead. As I work on the intricate details of jewelry and ornaments that adorn the dancing figures, I remember the ancient teachings about the symbolic meaning of each element. The golden wreaths that crown the dancers speak of victory over death, of triumph in the great contest between mortality and eternity. The bracelets and anklets that encircle their limbs suggest the bonds of love that connect all souls in the realm of the blessed, ties that strengthen rather than constrain, relationships that enhance rather than limit. The painted floor beneath the dancer's feet must appear to support movements that defy earthly physics, to provide foundation for steps that follow rhythms unknown to mortal choreography. I paint patterns that suggest the mathematical harmonies that govern cosmic order, geometric designs that speak of the underlying structure that supports all existence, decorative elements that hint at the perfect balance that characterizes the realm of the blessed dead.
The mystery of these dancing figures lies not just in their technical execution, but in their ability to suggest truths that cannot be spoken, to hint at experiences that lie beyond the reach of ordinary language, to promise joys that await those who successfully complete the great journey from mortality to divine existence. They dance not just for entertainment, but as expression of the fundamental harmony that governs all creation, as visual proof that death is not ending, but transformation into something more beautiful than earthly life ever imagined. Each brushstroke I apply to these eternal dancers carries the weight of centuries of tradition, the accumulated wisdom of masters who understood that tomb painting serves purposes beyond mere decoration, that art can bridge the gap between the visible and invisible worlds, that pigment and stone can capture truths that philosophy struggles to express. In their painted movements lies the promise of liberation, the guarantee of joy, the visual proof that the greatest mystery of all leads not to darkness, but to light beyond imagining.
Hidden within the painted scenes that grace these tomb walls lie messages that speak to those who possess the ancient knowledge, symbols encoded in the very pigments we choose, meanings layered beneath the surface beauty that casual observers admire without understanding. This is the deepest mystery of our craft, the ability to embed secret communications within seemingly decorative art, to create visual texts that can be read only by initiates who have learned the sacred language of color and form. The red ochre that forms the background of the banquet scene carries within its earthy hue a message about the life force that animates all existence, the vital energy that flows from the realm of the living into the domain of the dead and back again in endless circulation. But to those who know the deeper meanings, this particular shade of red speaks of specific rituals that must be performed, of offerings that must be made, of prayers that must be spoken if the deceased is to successfully navigate the trials that await beyond death. I apply the pigment with brushstrokes that follow patterns older than written language, movements that trace invisible symbols on the stone surface, gestures that embed meaning within meaning like nested boxes of increasingly precious contents. The casual observer sees only skillful representation of a festive meal, but the initiated reader perceives instructions for the soul's journey, maps through territories that no living person has explored, guidance for the greatest adventure of all. Vel watches as I work, his young eyes beginning to perceive the subtle variations in technique that separate ordinary decoration from sacred communication.
He is learning that every choice we make carries significance. Not just what we paint, but how we paint it. Not just the colors we select, but the order in which we apply them. Not just the subjects we depict, but the precise manner in which we arrange them within the composition. See how the wine cup is positioned in relation to the pomegranate, I whisper, my voice barely audible in the chamber's profound silence. To most viewers, this appears to be mere artistic arrangement, pleasing to the eye but without deeper meaning. But to those who understand the ancient language, the angle between these objects speaks of the proper timing for certain rituals, the precise moment when offerings should be made to ensure the deceased's safe passage through the underworld. The blue pigment derived from lapis lazuli carries its own encrypted messages, its celestial hue speaking not just of sky and sea, but of specific deities who must be propitiated, of divine forces that can either aid or hinder the soul's journey, depending on whether the proper protocols have been observed. The way I apply this precious color, in broad washes or delicate details, in pure form or mixed with other pigments, creates a visual code that initiates can read like written text.
The positioning of figures within the painted scenes follows mathematical principles that serve dual purposes, creating compositions that please the eye while encoding information that serves the soul's practical needs in the afterlife. The distance between the reclining banqueters speaks of social relationships that continue beyond death, while the gestures of their painted hands indicate the proper forms of greeting and recognition that souls must use when encountering each other in the realm of the blessed dead. Even the seemingly decorative borders that frame each painted scene carry their own secret meanings. Patterns that appear to be mere ornamentation but actually function as protective spells. Visual incantations that guard the tomb against malevolent forces that might seek to disturb the deceased's eternal rest. The interlacing vines speak of life's continuity, while the geometric patterns create barriers that negative energies cannot cross. The gold leaf that highlights certain elements in the painted scenes does more than add visual richness. It creates focal points that draw the soul's attention to specific details that carry crucial information about the afterlife's geography, about the landmarks that will help the deceased navigate through territories where ordinary naps provide no guidance. Each gleaming accent marks a waypoint on the journey that every soul must make, a beacon that will shine with divine light when viewed from the perspective of the dead. The technique of layering pigments creates additional levels of meaning, with underlying colors that remain partially visible through transparent glazes, speaking to those who know how to read such subtle communications. The green that shows through the blue in certain areas indicates safe passages through dangerous territories, while the red that glows beneath yellow surfaces warns of trials that must be faced with courage and wisdom. The very brushstrokes themselves carry encoded information, their direction and pressure creating a kind of visual braille that initiates can interpret through careful study. Horizontal strokes speak of earthly concerns that must be resolved before the soul can progress, while vertical movements indicate divine assistance that will be provided at crucial moments. The varying pressure with which pigment is applied creates subtle variations in color density that function as a form of spiritual punctuation, marking the beginning and end of specific instructions. The mixing of certain pigments in precise proportions creates colors that exist nowhere in nature,
hues that serve as signals to divine beings who watch over the deceased's journey, chromatic passwords that grant access to celestial realms that remain closed to unprepared souls. These secret colors can only be created by masters who have learned the ancient formulas, who understand the alchemical processes that transform base materials into substances that bridge the gap between earthly and divine realms. The symbolic animals that appear throughout the painted scenes, birds that seem to fly between worlds, serpents that speak of wisdom and renewal, lions that represent courage in the face of ultimate mystery, are positioned according to codes that indicate the specific challenges the deceased will face and the resources available to meet them. Each creature serves as both decoration and instruction, both artistic element and practical guidance. As I continue working on these encoded messages, I feel the weight of responsibility that comes with serving as guardian of knowledge that could be dangerous in the wrong hands, that could be misused by those who lack the wisdom to understand its proper application. The secrets embedded in these painted walls represent centuries of accumulated understanding about the nature of death and what lies beyond. Wisdom that must be preserved, but also protected from those who would exploit it for selfish purposes. The painted scenes that will grace this tomb when my work is complete will speak in multiple languages simultaneously, the obvious tongue of artistic beauty that all can appreciate, and the hidden dialect of sacred knowledge that reveals its secrets only to those who have earned the right to understand them through years of study, dedication, and spiritual preparation. The sound of marching feet echoes through the hills above our underground sanctuary, the measured tread of Roman legions that have come not as conquerors, but as something far more dangerous, as admirers who seek to possess our secrets while destroying the culture that created them. I pause in my work, brush suspended above the painted wall, listening to the approaching footsteps that herald the end of our ancient world and the beginning of something altogether different, something that values technique over wisdom, product over process, imitation over inspiration. The delegation that descends into our workshop is led by Marcus Claudius Marcellus, a Roman patrician whose appreciation for Etruscan art is matched only by his determination to acquire its secrets for the glory of Rome. His eyes move across our painted walls with the calculating gaze of a merchant appraising inventory, seeing not sacred art, but valuable commodity, not spiritual communication, but decorative technique that could enhance Roman prestige and power. Magnificent, he declares, his Latin carrying the authority of conquest, the confidence of those who believe that might makes right, that victory in battle grants ownership of all that the defeated have created. The Senate has heard reports of your skill, master painter. Rome has need of such artistry to decorate the tombs of our own great men, to create monuments worthy of our expanding empire. I set down my brush with deliberate care, understanding that this moment represents more than mere commercial negotiation. It is the collision between two worldviews, two approaches to art and life and death that cannot be reconciled without fundamental transformation of one or both. The Romans see our painted tombs as decoration, as status symbols that speak of wealth and power. We understand them as sacred communication, as bridges between worlds, as maps through territories that exist beyond mortal comprehension. Our techniques have been developed over centuries, I reply, choosing my words with the care of a diplomat walking through a minefield. They serve purposes that extend beyond mere decoration, that connect to beliefs and practices that may not translate easily to Roman customs and expectations. Marcellus waves away my concerns with the casual gesture of one accustomed to having obstacles removed by imperial authority. Beliefs can be adapted, customs modified. What matters is the skill itself, the ability to create images that appear to live and breathe, that capture the essence of the subject with such fidelity that viewers feel they are in the presence of the person depicted. Surely such talent should serve the greatest civilization the world has ever known.
The offer he presents is generous by any material standard. Gold enough to purchase estates, citizenship that would elevate my family's status, commissions that would ensure work for generations. But the price he demands in return goes beyond mere technique to encompass the very soul of our craft, the spiritual understanding that transforms mere decoration into sacred art, that makes our painted figures more than representations and elevates them to the status of divine communication. Vel stands frozen beside the pigment table, his young face reflecting the confusion of one who has devoted his life to learning an art that may have no future, whose skills may become obsolete before he has the chance to master them fully. The apprentice system that has preserved our knowledge for centuries faces extinction not through violence, but through absorption, not through destruction, but through transformation into something fundamentally different. Consider the advantages, Marcellus continues, his voice carrying the persuasive power of one who has rarely been refused. Roman patronage would spread your techniques throughout the known world, would ensure that your artistic legacy survives and flourishes rather than remaining confined to this small corner of Italy. Think of the monuments you could create, the tombs of emperors and senators that would showcase your skills to audiences beyond your wildest imagination. The temptation is real. For every artist dreams of recognition, of work that will be seen and admired by the greatest number of viewers. But I understand what Marcellus does not, that our art serves purposes that cannot be separated from the culture that created it, that the techniques he admires are inseparable from the beliefs that give them meaning, that to transplant our methods to Roman soil would be to create something that appears similar but lacks the essential spirit that makes it truly alive. The painted figures that surround us seem to watch this negotiation with the patient attention of those who have transcended earthly concerns, who understand that empires rise and fall while art endures, that techniques may be copied, but wisdom cannot be stolen, that the deepest secrets of any craft lie not in its methods, but in the understanding that guides their application. I will need time to consider your generous offer, I tell Marcellus, knowing that delay is the only weapon available to those who lack the power to refuse outright. Such a decision affects not just myself, but the entire tradition I represent, the knowledge that has been entrusted to my care,
the responsibility I bear to those who will come after. The Roman nods with the patience of one who has accustomed to getting what he wants, who understands that resistance is often merely a negotiating tactic rather than genuine refusal. Of course, but do not take too long in your deliberations. Rome's patience, while considerable, is not infinite. And there are other artists, other techniques that could serve our purposes if yours prove unavailable.
The threat is subtle, but unmistakable. Cooperate willingly, or face the consequences of Roman displeasure. Contribute voluntarily to the empire's glory, or watch as others receive the rewards that could have been mine. This is how conquest works in the new world that Rome is creating, not through crude force alone, but through the more sophisticated pressure of economic incentive and social advancement, through the promise of inclusion in something greater than any individual culture could achieve alone. As the delegation departs, climbing back toward the world of sunlight and political maneuvering, I am left to contemplate choices that will determine not just my own fate, but the future of an artistic tradition that has served the spiritual needs of my people for centuries. The painted figures that surround me offer no easy answers, only the patient reminder that all earthly powers are temporary, while art, if it serves truth rather than mere ambition, can achieve a form of immortality that outlasts the empires that seek to possess it. The commission that will be my last arrives not from the living, but from the realm of shadows, whispered to me in dreams that come with increasing frequency as my own journey toward the final threshold draws near. Tonight, I begin the most personal work of my career, the decoration of my own tomb, the chamber where my body will rest while my soul embarks on the great adventure that I have spent a lifetime preparing others to undertake. The walls of my burial chamber wait in darkness, their limestone surfaces as blank as the moment of birth, as empty as the space between heartbeats, as silent as the pause between question and answer. These surfaces will receive the culmination of everything I have learned, everything I have understood about the sacred art of painting for eternity, everything I wish to communicate to those who will visit this place when my voice has been stilled forever. I approach this final work with hands that shake not from age, but from the weight of absolute responsibility, understanding that every brushstroke must be perfect, every color choice precisely calculated, every symbolic element positioned with mathematical accuracy. There will be no opportunity for revision, no chance to correct mistakes, no possibility of improvement once the work is complete and I have passed beyond the veil that separates the living from the dead. The composition I have planned for these walls represents the synthesis of a lifetime's study, the distillation of decades spent in communion with the mysteries that surround death and what lies beyond. The eastern wall will show my own journey through the underworld, the trials and challenges that await every soul,
the guides and guardians who will assist or hinder progress, depending on the wisdom and preparation the deceased brings to the encounter. Vel assists me in this final work, his young hand steady as he prepares pigments according to formulas I have taught him, his movements careful and reverent as he tends the oil lamps that provide our only illumination in this underground sanctuary. He understands that he is witnessing something unprecedented, a master painting his own passage into eternity, an artist creating the visual map that will guide his own soul through territories that no living person has explored. Remember everything you see, I tell him, as I begin the preliminary sketches, my charcoal moving across the stone with movements that have become as natural as breathing. This knowledge must not die with me. The techniques I use tonight, the symbols I choose, the proportions I establish, all of this must be preserved and passed on to those who will continue our sacred work after I am gone. The central figure in my painted journey will be myself, but not as I am now, aged and worn by decades of labor in underground chambers, but as I will become in the realm of the blessed dead, restored to the prime of life, radiating the wisdom that comes only through successful completion of the great transition. The pose I choose speaks of confidence without arrogance, of readiness without haste, of acceptance without resignation.
The guides who will accompany me on this eternal journey must be painted with special care, for they represent not just artistic elements, but actual spiritual beings who will manifest when the time comes for my soul to depart this earthly realm. The psychopomp who leads the way appears in the form of a youth whose beauty speaks of divine origin, whose gestures indicate the path that leads from darkness into light, whose expression promises that the journey, however challenging, will end in joy beyond imagining. The background against which this spiritual drama unfolds must suggest the landscape of the afterlife itself, not the familiar hills and valleys of earthly geography, but the symbolic terrain through which souls must travel to reach their final destination. I paint mountains that represent the obstacles that must be overcome, rivers that speak of purification and renewal, forests that symbolize the mysteries that must be penetrated through wisdom and courage. The colors I choose for this final work carry meanings that go beyond mere aesthetic consideration, each hue selected for its ability to communicate specific truths about the nature of death and rebirth. The blues speak of the infinite spaces through which the soul must travel, while the reds represent the life force that continues even after the body has been abandoned. The golds promise the divine illumination that awaits those who successfully complete the journey, while the purples suggest the royal dignity that all souls achieve in the realm of the blessed dead. As the night progresses and the painted scenes take shape on the tomb walls, I feel the presence of all who have gone before me, the masters who taught me the sacred mysteries, the colleagues who shared the burden of preserving ancient knowledge, the countless souls whose journeys I have depicted in tombs throughout Etruria. They gather around me like invisible witnesses, their approval or disapproval evident in the way the pigments flow or resist,
in the ease or difficulty with which each element of the composition falls into place. The painted banquet that will welcome me into the company of the blessed dead must include figures from my own life, family members who have preceded me into the realm of shadows, friends whose wisdom guided my earthly journey, masters whose teachings shaped my understanding of art and life and death. Each figure must be painted with love as well as skill, with memory as well as technique, with gratitude as well as artistic precision. As the night progresses and the painted scenes take shape on the tomb walls, I feel the presence of all who have gone before me, the masters who taught me the sacred mysteries, the colleagues who shared the burden of preserving ancient knowledge, the countless souls whose journeys I have depicted in tombs throughout Etruria. They gather around me like invisible witnesses, their approval or disapproval evident in the way the pigments flow or resist, in the ease or difficulty with which each element of the composition falls into place. The painted banquet that will welcome me into the company of the blessed dead must include figures from my own life, family members who have preceded me into the realm of shadows, friends whose wisdom guided my earthly journey, masters whose teachings shaped my understanding of art and life and death. Each figure must be painted with love as well as skill, with memory as well as technique, with gratitude as well as artistic precision. The symbolic elements that frame and support the main narrative carry their own weight of meaning. Protective symbols that will guard my tomb against malevolent forces. Guiding signs that will help my soul navigate through the complexities of the afterlife. Promises of divine assistance that will be available when the journey becomes most challenging. Every detail has been calculated to serve both artistic and spiritual purposes, to create beauty while providing practical guidance for the greatest adventure of all. The oil lamps burn lower as the work progresses, their flames creating shadows that dance across the painted walls like spirits celebrating the completion of another sacred work. In their flickering light, the figures I have created seem to move and breathe, to acknowledge my presence with the subtle awareness that comes to all art when it achieves perfect harmony between technique and vision, between earthly skill and divine inspiration. As dawn approaches in the world above, I apply the final brushstrokes to my own eternal portrait, completing the work that will serve as both artistic legacy and spiritual passport, both monument to a life devoted to sacred art and map for the journey that lies ahead. The painted figure that bears my likeness gazes back at me with eyes that seem to hold knowledge of futures I cannot imagine, of destinations I have yet to reach, of mysteries that will be revealed only when the time comes to lay down my brushes forever and take up the pilgrim's staff. The torch gutters in my trembling hand as I make my final inspection of the painted walls, its flame casting dancing shadows that bring the eternal figures to life one last time before darkness claims this sacred space forever. The oil lamps that have illuminated my work for decades burn low in their niches, their wicks consumed, their reservoirs nearly empty, their light fading like the breath of a dying man who has spoken his final words and now prepares for the great silence that awaits beyond speech. The painted figures that surround me seem to pulse with their own inner radiance, as if the pigments themselves have absorbed something of the divine fire that inspired their creation, as if the limestone walls have become windows onto realms that exist beyond the reach of mortal understanding. In the flickering torchlight, the eternal banqueters raise their cups in silent toast. The dancers move to music that only the dead can hear. The guides and guardians take their positions for journeys that will outlast empires. Vel stands beside me in the profound silence that fills this underground sanctuary, his young face marked by the premature wisdom that comes from witnessing the completion of something that transcends mere human achievement, that touches the very foundations of existence itself. He has learned more in these final hours than years of ordinary instruction could have taught him, has absorbed through observation and participation the deepest mysteries of our ancient craft. The work is complete, I whisper, my voice barely audible in the chamber's profound stillness. The painted figures will watch over these chambers long after we have joined them in the realm of shadows, will guide souls through the mysteries of death when our own voices have been stilled forever. This is the true immortality that art can achieve, not the preservation of individual names, but the continuation of sacred purpose, the eternal service to those who must make the greatest journey of all. The torch flame wavers and steadies, casting its warm light on walls that hold within their painted surfaces the accumulated wisdom of centuries, the patient knowledge of generations who understood that death is not ending but transformation, not darkness, but passage into light beyond imagining. Each brushstroke carries forward the understanding of masters who came before. Each color choice reflects the accumulated experience of artists who devoted their lives to serving purposes greater than themselves. The torch flame wavers and steadies, casting its warm light on walls that hold within their painted surfaces the accumulated wisdom of centuries, the patient knowledge of generations who understood that death is not ending, but transformation, not darkness, but passage into light beyond imagining. I move through the chamber one final time, checking details that will matter only to eyes that see with the clarity of eternity, adjusting elements that exist at the very edge of perception, ensuring that every aspect of the painted scenes achieves the perfect harmony that allows art to transcend mere decoration and become sacred communication. The mathematical proportions that govern each composition speak in the universal language of cosmic order, while the symbolic elements create visual prayers that will be answered by forces that exist beyond human understanding. The pigments that have served me so faithfully throughout my career rest in their vessels like sleeping spirits, their colors still vibrant despite the years of faithful service, their potential still infinite despite the countless masterpieces they have helped to create. The cinnabar glows like liquid fire, the ultramarine holds captured sky, the gold leaf waits to add divine radiance to works yet to be conceived. by artists yet to be born. The tools of my trade stand in their appointed places like faithful servants awaiting final orders, their surfaces bearing the patina of decades of use, their forms shaped by countless encounters with the materials of creation, the brushes that have been extensions of my will, the grinding stones that have transformed raw minerals into the substance of dreams, the measuring instruments that have ensured perfect proportion, all wait in patient readiness for hands that will never again guide them in the sacred work of painting for eternity. The underground atelier that has been my sanctuary for 30 years breathes quietly around me, its walls holding within their carved surfaces the accumulated memory of countless hours spent in communion with the mysteries that surround death and what lies beyond. The chamber exists outside the normal flow of time, suspended between the world of the living above and the realm of the dead that stretches endlessly below, a bridge between worlds that will continue to serve its purpose long after those who created it have passed into legend. The painted figures watch with the patient attention of those who have transcended earthly concerns, who understand that all temporal things must pass, while art, if it serves truth rather than mere ambition, can achieve a form of immortality that outlasts the civilizations that create it. Their eyes hold knowledge of futures I cannot imagine, of viewers yet unborn who will stand in these chambers and feel their hearts lifted by beauty that speaks across centuries in the eternal language of color and form.
As the torch flame grows smaller and the shadows deepen, I feel the presence of all who have practiced this sacred art before me, the masters who taught me the ancient mysteries, the colleagues who shared the burden of preserving knowledge that could not be written down, the countless souls whose journeys I have depicted in tombs throughout Etruria. They gather around me like invisible witnesses, their approval evident in the perfect harmony that the completed work has achieved. The darkness that approaches is not empty, but full of promise, pregnant with possibilities that exist beyond the reach of mortal imagination. In this sacred space where art serves its highest purpose, where painted figures guide souls through the greatest mystery of all, the boundary between life and death grows thin as morning mist, as permeable as the veil that separates the visible from the invisible worlds. The torch gutters one final time and dies, leaving the chamber in darkness that is not absence but presence, not ending but beginning, not silence but the profound quiet that comes before the greatest music of all begins to play. The painted figures continue their eternal watch in the darkness, guardians of mysteries that time cannot extinguish, keepers of secrets that will outlive empires, witnesses to the endless human quest to capture the infinite and make it momentarily visible to mortal eyes. In the perfect darkness that now embraces this sacred space, the painted walls pulse with their own inner light, the accumulated radiance of centuries of devotion, the patient glow of art that serves purposes beyond the merely aesthetic. Here, in chambers carved from the earth's heart, the eternal figures keep their vigil, ready to guide souls through the mysteries that await beyond the final breath, prepared to speak across time in the universal language of beauty
that transcends all boundaries between the living and the dead. Good night, traveler of time. May your dreams carry echoes of the voices we have borrowed today, and may tomorrow find you rested in the gentle footprints we have left in the infinite sand of history.
The darkness settles over the painted chambers like a benediction, soft and complete, wrapping the eternal figures in silence that speaks louder than any earthly voice ever could. The oil lamps have surrendered their final flames to the patient night, their wicks consumed in service to visions that will outlive the very stones that hold them, their light transformed into something more permanent than fire, the inner radiance that glows from walls where art has achieved perfect communion with the divine. In this profound stillness, the painted figures begin their true work, no longer dependent on external illumination to reveal their beauty, no longer requiring mortal eyes to witness their eternal dance. They exist now in the realm beyond sight, in the dimension where souls recognize truth without need of physical light, where beauty speaks directly to the spirit without mediation of earthly senses. The banqueters recline in perpetual celebration, their painted cups forever raised in toast to mysteries that transcend human understanding, their faces radiating joy that knows no diminishment, no shadow of doubt or fear. The wine they drink eternally is pressed from grapes that grow in vineyards of paradise, fermented in vessels blessed by gods whose names are written in languages older than speech itself. The dancers move to rhythms that echo through dimensions beyond the merely physical, their painted forms capturing movements that follow the cosmic choreography governing the dance of stars and planets, the eternal ballet that connects all existence in patterns too vast for mortal comprehension. Their steps trace sacred geometries on floors that exist in realms where mathematics becomes music, where proportion transforms into prayer. The guides and guardians take their positions along pathways that lead through territories no living soul has mapped, their painted hands extended in gestures of welcome and protection, their eyes holding knowledge of destinations that await beyond the final threshold. The banqueters recline in perpetual celebration, their painted cups forever raised in toast to mysteries that transcend human understanding, their faces radiating joy that knows no diminishment, no shadow of doubt or fear. The wine they drink eternally is pressed from grapes that grow in vineyards of paradise, fermented in vessels blessed by gods whose names are written in languages older than speech itself. The dancers move to rhythms that echo through dimensions beyond the merely physical, their painted forms capturing movements that follow the cosmic choreography governing the dance of stars and planets, the eternal ballet that connects all existence in patterns too vast for mortal comprehension. Their steps trace sacred geometries on floors that exist in realms where mathematics becomes music, where proportion transforms into prayer. The guides and guardians take their positions along pathways that lead through territories no living soul has mapped, their painted hands extended in gestures of welcome and protection, their eyes holding knowledge of destinations that await beyond the final threshold. They are more than artistic representations, they are actual presences,
spiritual beings who manifest through pigment and stone to serve those who must make the greatest journey of all. The chamber breathes with the slow rhythm of geological time, expanding and contracting with forces that move mountains and shape continents, that measure existence not in heartbeats, but in eons, not in human lifespans, but in the vast cycles that govern the birth and death of worlds. In this sacred space, time moves differently, flowing like honey, carrying forward the accumulated wisdom of ages into futures bright with possibility. The chamber breathes with the slow rhythm of geological time, expanding and contracting with force.
The painted walls hold within their limestone embrace more than mere decoration. They contain the distilled essence of a civilization's understanding about life and death and what lies beyond. The accumulated knowledge of generations who devoted their lives to serving purposes greater than individual ambition. The patient wisdom of artists who understood that true immortality comes not through personal fame, but through service to eternal truths. The pigments that created these eternal visions rest now in perfect stability, their molecular structures locked in configurations that will endure long after the empires that commissioned them have crumbled to dust, long after the languages that named their colors have been forgotten, long after the very hills that shelter these chambers have been worn smooth by wind and rain and the patient passage of countless seasons. The underground sanctuary exists now as it was always meant to exist, as a bridge between worlds, as gateway between the realm of the living and the domain of the dead, as sacred space where the boundaries between temporal and eternal grow thin as spider silk, as permeable as the veil that separates the visible from the invisible dimensions of existence. Here, in chambers carved from the earth's bones, the painted figures keep their eternal vigil, ready to guide souls through mysteries that await beyond the final breath, prepared to speak across time in the universal language of beauty that transcends all boundaries between the living and the dead. They are guardians of secrets that time cannot extinguish, keepers of wisdom that will outlive empires, witnesses to the endless human quest to capture the infinite and make it momentarily visible to mortal eyes. The darkness that embraces these sacred walls is not empty, but full of presence, pregnant with possibilities that exist beyond the reach of earthly imagination. In this perfect silence, the painted figures continue their work of guidance and protection, their eternal service to those who must make the greatest transition of all, their patient witness to the truth that death is not ending, but transformation, not darkness, but passage into light beyond imagining. The chambers sleep now in the profound quiet that comes when sacred work is complete, when art has achieved its highest purpose, when beauty has been wedded to truth in bonds that time cannot break. The painted figures dream in colors that have no names, move to music that exists only in the realm of the blessed dead, celebrate victories that transcend all earthly understanding of triumph and defeat. Good night, traveler of time. May your dreams carry echoes of the voices we have borrowed today, and may tomorrow find you rested in the gentle footprints we have left in the infinite sand of history.